Alrighty, welcome everybody. Here we are for another episode, time travel enhanced, of our kitchen chaos shenanigans. With us, as always, we've got Heather behind the camera. That's her waving.
Very creative.
And again, this week we have Sebastian, who's rotating back in the house for, back in the kitchen here.
Yeah, I'm here another week.
So. Yeah, you know the beginning of that episode where, like they cut onto the thing and Jack Bauer gets stabbed with a knife and starts bleeding on the ground, and you're like, what? And then they like cut to, the credits and the beginning character stuff, and then they come back and then it's like 24 hours earlier, all this other weird stuff had happened. We're going to do that, only instead of stabbing Jack Bauer, we're going to stab a loaf of bread here.
We're going to do a lot to a loaf of bread.
And I guess the other difference is that we've sort of already run the, the opening cast sequence and stuff because you kind of already knew all the characters. So, the thing to know about bread, so we're going to start with our, final time, timeline here. So the thing to know about bread, if you're going to do a hard-crusted bread, like a French bread, then one of the things is that what happens is right when it first goes into the oven, if the oven's pretty hot and it's 425 to make this bread, it's going to want to crust up, right? Because all that stuff's going to start. So we're going to start out by just doing a quick water wash with it.
You're going to take an egg wash and bread.
Yeah. So if this were like a shiny or a roll that we wanted all shiny, we could do egg white wash, or they do milk washes for some bread, or cream. But water is usually used for French bread because, like I said, you don't care about all the shiny and the whatever stuff, but really you just want it so that water prevents the dough prevents it from heating as much, which prevents it from hardening into a crust for just a little while.
And you should use warm water for this process.
Sure. All right, that's cool. All right. So, the stabby part.
Welcome to the stabby part.
In order to let the crust expand a little bit as it goes, they call this docking or scoring or other things. We're just going to, as lightly as we can, just, get it just a little bit with they say sharpest knife you've got or a razor blade, but I find a serrated knife is usually pretty good for it.
So hi to my mom and hi to your mom and dad.
Alrighty then. So we're going to go into the oven. The other thing is when we put this on, you want a little bit of steam in the oven for kind of the same reason as the water wash. So we've got a pan up underneath it.
Hold on before you pour here.
Water.
Let me get in. Oh, whoa, crazy. Sorry about the camera there, folks. All right, so there's a separate pan down underneath.
Yeah, I think we have to bring it out a little bit though. You good?
Yep.
Is that good?
There you go. Yeah.
All right.
Don't wear glasses when you do this.
Yes.
I can't
All right.
wait.
So we'll check back on him later. And now we're going to jump to our other timeline here. You all right?
Yeah.
Oh,
I got some steam in my glasses.
So
I couldn't see.
So when we're gonna now we're gonna go on to the beginning timeline here. We're gonna start out with dough that that doesn't exist yet, right? We're gonna start making the dough. So the first thing I like to do is I'm kind of weirdly protective of yeast. So I kind of like to keep yeast away from salt as much as I can because salt kills yeast. So I do all kinds of weird things to try and prevent that from happening. So a little bit of this is some oddness. This recipe has mostly 4 ingredients: water, salt, flour, and yeast. There's a little bit of sugar just to give the yeast kind of an initial little kick. And I mean, just often in a French bread they'll do that. That's it's just sort of how it be thing.
That's just how it be sometimes, folks.
Exactly. So we're gonna kind of mix that in, and really this is just to give the yeast a little bit of initial start. Even if you're, I don't know. There's different kinds of yeast. They say, oh, this one you don't have to do this and blah, blah, blah. But it's still nice to do it because it just, once it starts to foam, it's kind of like getting happy. So we're going to start with the, here a little bit.
So my mom says, hey, Sebastian.
Hi, Suzanne.
They're all saying hi to each other. Allison says they can't find yeast in NOLA. Everyone's baking bread. Yeah, it's the same here, Allison, except that we have these awesome neighbors who bought like giant packages on Amazon and are sharing it with the neighborhood. So we got a friend who gave us a little baggie and then another friend down the street who delivered some to our door. So we're very fortunate.
Yes. So, so I take a little bit of the water and get it going with the sugar and the yeast, and then I take the rest of the water and then most of the flour, and I'm just going to kind of like start to kind of, you know, just incorporate it a little bit here, while that stuff kind of foams up. And like I said, there's a whole technique where you like, they call it autolyzing, where you like, you know, rest the yeast with, rest just flour and water kind of by themselves for a while and blah, blah, blah. This isn't quite that, but you know, as long as we're just like showing up for a little while on the yeast, then we can also kind of, you know, start messing with this a little bit too. So once that starts to be kind of combined and it's a pain to deal with a spatula, you can just mount it in the mixer. We consider doing this like with hands, you know, instead of in a mixer, but you know, that's just like,
It's a lot of effort.
it's a lot of effort, isn't it? Yeah. So
I'm tired.
yeah, we've been working hard today anyway. Yeah, so we'll get this. Oops.
That's a dough hook. You should be using that attachment if you have a kitchenette.
Yeah.
Also,
So,
don't put your hands in it.
well, a lot of times, if you like for the initial stir, sometimes people do the paddle and then blah blah blah. But there's kind of, I don't know, not a reason to dirty more things.
Yeah.
So I mix this pretty well, so it kind of doesn't, you know, need to, you know, it's kind of already coming together pretty well. So that's gonna be pretty decent. So here, if you can probably look and see. So this is some salt and some of the flour. So what I want to do is, like I said, anytime there's like liquid, like water, you know, egg whites or milk or whatever else, I try not to let there be salt, kind of in pure salt form, yeast by like in itself in water with salt at the same time. So I'm gonna like add this, kind of put it together, let it, you know, goop together for a little bit and kind of come together as a goop. And I'm just gonna like mix the salt in with a little bit of the flour. And that way the yeast will sort of be like already distributed, you know, having, you know, gotten happy for a little while, all to, you know, kind of out in their little flour land, before they start getting around with salt. If ever you've got like salt in water and then the yeast go into the water, then a lot of them are gonna get killed and, you know, you just won't have as much rise as quickly. You know, it's just your fermentation's not as good. So, so that's why we do that. I think we will, what you got? Yeah, well, yeah, that's like kind of once it's all mixed and whatnot. Yeah, so we will.
There's a
yeah.
timer for this game.
What's that?
There's
Oh, is it?
already a timer
Oh,
for
cool.
this game.
All right. Well, we're I don't know. Yeah, we're kind of like on schedule right now. So
This is rare, so we're not used to it.
yeah, this is usually the time when there's like 8 people who ask questions. You like, you know, you're just going. But
If anyone has questions, feel free to post them.
yeah,
That'd
or
be
if you want to
fun.
post the last thing that you baked, you know, because right now, like,
Content.
if you
Or
look
the last time travel movie you watched.
yes, indeed. Yeah, because right now, if you look at the stores, there's like no flour in the shelves. There's no yeast. There's whatever. It's
If you manage to bake something.
I think on average, everybody's making like 8 things a day. You know, with all the freaking flour they're buying. So
This will be 3 loaves of bread, just to give you an idea.
So Jen Kramer just joined us, and I want to call her out because she's I think been on every single one of our things, so she gets like extra
the good
credit.
Call out. Yeah,
Right.
You want to shout
Right, shout
Yeah,
out.
yeah,
Thank you.
right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Got to get the
We wanna
teenager
beat
to
her
correct
down.
my
No, that's
language.
not it.
No,
Well, it's like a
she's been on
dish
every single one of our things, and she's like had sourdough for how long, Jen? Tell us about your sourdough because
Yeah.
it's an interesting deal. Like you have cool sourdough starter. A lot of people are doing that right now, but you're like old school with this.
In fact, I'm not even going to paste the name in that you call these
Yes.
things because your yeast from the the olden days is
It's got a great name.
yeah. All right, we're going to do another hit of other pan, the bottom pan.
Of course.
So this is the steam
We're gonna do
action.
another hit of steam. Just we've got multiple pans ready, and yeah, just pour some in. Just go nuts.
So tell us again what this is doing. Why are we doing
Yeah,
this
this
steam?
keeps the crust nice and soft as it evaporates. You can pour a little bit in the other one too if you can. Plus it sounds really cool for the camera. There you go.
That one's a lot more hot.
Yeah.
Okay. Fun. Do we
Yeah.
want to do a science fact? Because the water does something cool when you pour it in a hot pan called the light and frost effect.
Go nuts.
So when you pour water into a really hot thing and it's moving around a lot, you couldn't see it because it's really hard to stick a camera in our oven. Thankfully, the water, it doesn't actually stick to the surface at all. It has it has so much surface tension due to the heat that it just kind of whizzes around the pan. And if you do that in like a skillet, you can get it just moving in a circle really fast. And that's what I do for fun sometimes.
Cool. All right, we're gonna get this going here.
I still can't see.
Yeah, so you can see it's kind of nice and foamed up already. So yeah, we're gonna go ahead and add this, and then we're gonna start some stirring going here.
We know our KitchenAid's loud. We apologize. Jen Kramer has 3 that are 90 to 120 years old.
Yes, yeah, and they're called.
She didn't say it in here.
Oh,
Jen.
it's a good enough. It's a good enough.
It's a good name. We like your name
Yeah.
of your
I saw someone say
yeah.
that's a fun fact. It is. I'm very smart.
Mom says you're a riot, Sebastian.
Like in a good way?
In a good way.
Yeah.
Good, good.
Yeah.
That's a compliment.
A riot like, you're disturbing the peace, or a riot like you're fun? That's gonna look real strange.
Smells pretty
whatever.
yeasty
It's
in
a little
here.
bit goopy and whatever else. So
Yeast is a living thing, so whenever you
Yeah.
throw it into a pot, it gets kind of strange.
I mean, this doesn't
There
have
it is.
anywhere. This doesn't have anywhere near the amount of flour yet. Actually, I should have probably withheld a little bit more flour, but it's close enough. The point is, you can see this is mostly it's kind of formed anyway, and so this is just helping the yeast kind of get a little bit stabilized before we start throwing all that salt in there.
The Yeasty Boys, facts.
There you go.
That's the name of her. That's the name of her sourdough
That's
starter.
excellent.
It's
And
an
then,
outstanding name for a, I've never heard a better name for really any names for sourdough starter. I guess I have heard some names. Some of them are quite crude, but that one's outstanding.
there was a North Seattle sourdough meetup. That's a place I'd like to be.
I do not doubt, yeah.
So Gawoon joined us. She's one of the folks that gave us the yeast that we were talking
Yeah.
about earlier.
Yeah, this very yeast actually that we're using today, so thank you, Goen, for that. Yeah. So you can see it's even starting to come together. The last time I did this, I had to stop and stir it down a little bit, but it's it's kind of coming together pretty well.
Yeah.
So you will sometimes see in a formula to mix at medium speed or something, anything that's written for a real bake shop, you have to decrement the speed a little bit. So this is stir. We will take it up to 2. Kind of once it comes together, it's pretty close there. I think this mixes at medium speed for 2 minutes, but or for 10 minutes. So that's going to be I don't take it any higher than speed 2 on this KitchenAid. This is the biggest KitchenAid, and still it's not, it's just not up to the, I think it's even the DC motor kind, but it's just doesn't have the juice that an actual, bakery thing does. So you have to just watch that a little bit. So you can see it's coming together, pretty well as a dough. I mean, it still needs some kneading, and if you look in there and can kind of see it. I'll turn this down just so you can hear what the heck I'm saying. So you can see, it's not very smooth or elastic yet. It's still kind of it pulls apart really easily and everything else. But it's kind of incorporated well, and it's got good mixing. So you can do it by hand for a hell of a long time, or in, like I said, about 10 minutes of kneading is pretty decent for this kind of dough. It can take it. It's easy to overmix doughs that have more fat and things because the gluten's not as strong, but this does pretty well with that. So
Should we get the dough to punch it?
I was going to say, sometimes this climbs up the hook a little bit. You can kind of see, right now, if it's starting to do this, we didn't have a hand signal for come over and look at the
Oh,
thing.
right. Well, that's okay. You just say, come over and look at the thing.
Yeah.
I was
Well,
reading
tried
Jen's
to- I
comment.
tried
She
to-
said her baking group has people burning out KitchenAids constantly, which I
Yeah.
thought you would appreciate hearing.
So if it climbs up the hook, you can like kind of, you always want to stop it, but it sort of just worked itself free a little bit, But you want it to be kind of like this, where it's as it's moving, you can see it kind of like pushing it to the side and then incorporating it and picking it back up again. It's pretty easy for it to just like get stuck, and just kind of rotate around a little bit. And if it's just doing that, it's not, it's not gonna get kind of full mixing. But this is actually behaving pretty well. So I'll just like,
It knows it's on camera.
yeah, poke it a little bit, and then
This is not how this usually happens.
yeah. So this is the point pretty much at which we will take this guy, and then we let him go mix, like I said, for about 10 minutes or so on speed 2. So
All right, so
so
we're
we're
going to
gonna-
do a little handoff here so you don't have to listen to the mixer forever. So Sebastian's going to hold the camera.
yes, and and what I'm
good
gonna
right there.
you're gonna need to undo. Yeah. So I'm gonna get this.
Dad's gonna get dough. I'm just gonna be here,
So we're now
Never
gonna-
mind.
We're going to jump to our third timeline here, where we've got a dough that has been rising for a little while. So once you get done with the mixing and the kneading and everything else, it just goes and gets put. It usually ferments. Kind of depends on how long. You can do it overnight at sort of room temperature or colder. You can do it, for a shorter time. I sometimes put it on the heat vent to like goose it if if we're trying to get it going pretty quick. But yeah, at this point you get like this one's pretty small because we divided it in half already to do the other. So in general, the it's kind of not very sticky here on the outside. You can kind of like just
It's gonna be a little tacky.
clean up all the
but-
pieces of itself. But I think we're gonna have Sebastian come and
Well-
we'll let him show y'all punching it down and then getting it ready for a rest. Here you go. Yeah.
All right. So
Yeah.
everybody has manned the camera so far,
Oh, sorry.
which I
Yeah.
appreciate. So
Yeah.
when you have your dough here, it's very wrinkly. The point of punching it down is to try and get all the air out of it. So what you're going to want to do is you fold it in half, kind of use the palm, mainly the heel, to just push it down and get the air out of it. And then, do you want to explain the rounding after that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So like you said, the punching down thing, you really is just there's a bunch of gas bubbles. You're trying to deflate all the big gas bubbles and redistribute everything.
And if I can get it right, you can actually almost see
Yeah.
the air escaping.
There you go. So then
I should have started this.
So then rounding, like you could roll it right now, it'll be a little harder to roll than if it did a little bit of rest. So sometimes what we'll do is we'll round it. So rounding is really about just kind of distributing it and kind of making it so that it's got a nice, just sort of even, you're kind of stretching the gluten out and...
It's a little harder to do if it's small.
No, that's fine. Yeah, it's close. Just take it.
Take it, and you're
Yeah.
trying to make it look
There you go.
pretty,
Yes.
basically. And I do this
There
in
you
the
go.
air. Some people do it on the
There you go.
table.
But that's
like
it. That's
that.
it. You're done. Like it's not.
And then
Yeah.
you see you've got that kind of smooth surface, and then all the sins are hidden
Exactly.
underneath.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
you know,
Just like a good homeowner. So yeah, you could put that and you could bench rest it for a while and let it kind of it just sort of relaxes. What you'll see right now, and actually we got a little bit out of order on our timeline. I think something happened with our time travel and
it's a very inexact science.
I was going to say, I think maybe the captain wasn't paying attention to the ship.
There was a
for second,
glitch
but,
in
but you can kind of see, like, we're rolling this guy out, and he doesn't kind of want to be rolled very well. So it's,
It's easier to let it rest.
that is what a little bench rest of 10 minutes does. However, we didn't, like when I did that other one and proofed it, it didn't bench rest either. So,
This is what you might end up doing.
yeah. So I tell you what, let us.
I set a timer to check it in 3 minutes.
Okay, cool. All right, then let's
Turns out that the
Kinda.
sous chef actually does stuff.
and casually come back here. So the whole point of this was to get it over here. I think and like do the little roll out part where it's like a little easier to do. There you go. So so at this point,
Look at him go.
so the way you make up like a baguette sort of shaped loaf is you start out with like a little bit of an oval, and you kind of roll it out so that it's a bigger oval. And really, you're just gonna kind of get it and then roll
I'm
it.
gonna come around the other side of you here. All right.
Just kind of get it and roll it like this. If you were going to do something where you were going to make rolls instead, you could get this. In fact, even before doing that super roll up thing, just once it's nice and elongated, you can get a dough scraper and just gonna kind of go along and just make like even little cuts along. The finished things of dough, if you're really like, you know, trying to do it pro, you can go weigh them out or some kind of thing. But then in the end, you just have this ball, and you can kind of like start to roll it. And if you, as long as the amount of flour isn't like too bad, and you know you've got kind of a decent surface here that you're keeping nice and clean, you can roll it.
Oh, look at that extra counter space.
Yeah.
We have to use this a lot. 'Cause
Secret mystery extra counter
Yeah.
space.
So you can like roll it and I don't know. It sort of comes together in this nice little ball. This is like a little bit smaller.
it's
on
almost the
side.
same concept as
And-
rounding, where all the sins are hid at the bottom.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, yeah. So we're gonna like just go ahead and hiding our sins here. We're just gonna like roll this back in real quick. All right. So we're gonna we'll kind of roll this guy like this, and in the end you've got this. So you've got these little ends. You just make sure they're kind of tucked in. You've got a little seam here, and if you sort of just, it doesn't have to be super crazy big, but if you just pinch it off a little bit, it kind of helps it stay nice and formed. And then you just kind of leave that seam on the bottom. And then when you're done, you've got a nice little loaf there.
Hello, folks.
So at this point, you could take him. This is ready to proof, so we can put this in our proofing zone here on the bottom. Can I just
proofing drawer?
Yeah, can you open the drawer? Yeah, this is like the food warmer thing, but it also doubles as a nice.
Hold on.
It's the bottom
Yeah.
shelf.
So we have a little bottom drawer in our
Yeah.
stove that is a proofing drawer. If you don't have a proofing drawer, you should.
You can put it in your utility room while the dryer's running. You can put it in the oven and just like set the oven to low if it'll go with the door open, and leave the door just low oven with the door open can proof. Put it in the sun, someplace where you have some sun. I don't know. I usually ferment dough, like rise it in a bowl sitting on the heat vent. So a little bit hotter than that is right for proofing. So for fermentation, it's like 75 to 80 degrees. Proofing 90 degrees or so, 90 to 100 is
Just
kind
what
of.
warming the roll was.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So the other thing you could do once it's made up, but before you proof it, you could also put it in the freezer. You can just set it on some parchment or a soap pad or something or whatever in the freezer until it's nice and frozen. Then wrap it nice, and you can hold it for a couple weeks or so. If it goes much longer, if it goes a few weeks or longer, it's generally not going to have the rise that you want. Companies make all these cool frozen whatever things that you can pop in and go, but they use all kind of chemical leaveners and things that we're not doing. So we're counting on those yeast. What?
Jen Kramer says Instant Pot can also proof.
I don't know, yeah.
Oh, look at that
Yeah, so this is
action.
correct. So let's see. So this is probably not totally done, but to check, yeah, we can. Why don't you go grab a?
So how do you?
Well,
You gave it a thumb.
Yeah, we gave it a thumb, but on the top it's not as accurate. But you can kind of hear it's not exactly hollow yet.
Yeah.
So If you
Usually,
wanna,
there's two things usually that I check. One is I see if it is all right. So this is actually looking pretty nicely done on the bottom. It still sounds like
you can almost
it
hear
sounds
this
a little bit
stuff
hollow,
there.
but a little bit maybe like there's some watery whatever. Like there's still just not all that liquid driven out.
And the second thing you can do
You
is
can also find a spot that's not too conspicuous here,
Yep.
and then
You can see that
Yeah,
it's
so this-
there's still little bits of dough
Yeah,
clinging onto it.
yeah, that's a little bit clingy and not. If it's a crumb, that's fine, but if it's something that looks like it's a little bit of of dough, it's not fine.
Yeah, and I hear someone saying
Yeah.
proofing drawer. Oops, I've been storing baking sheets in pans there. Yes.
Oh, well,
That's a thing some people do.
Well, in some ovens it doesn't heat, so yeah, I mean that's entirely possible. That's correct.
That's going back in without steam. And why are we putting it in without steam?
Well, it's got a crust already, so the steam at this point isn't going to help. The point of the steam is to keep the outside soft. Also, if you came on a little bit after, we did a water wash on it too, so that keeps the dough. It just puts a little more water, which means the water has to be driven up by heat before the starch is gelatinized and the protein denatures and makes a nice hard crust. So the longer that happens, it lets it grow a little bit more, so it doesn't crack all weirdly, and yeah, I mean it just sort of lets it form a more natural kind of shape too. So in fact, some fancy ovens, like bake shop ovens, they will usually have a lever that injects steam into the oven that you can do. And so usually the first 10-15 minutes you try to do it in steam.
Which we don't have because
Well, right.
we're regular.
Yeah, but yeah, it was okay. That's a pretty good size. If you look at the loaf we proofed, and then that we put into the drawer, and then you look at the loaf in the oven, that's pretty much the same thing. So,
Yeah, so it will expand some.
yeah. So I think a couple minutes and we're done. So yeah, when you hear things like baked till done, that's kind of what you get there.
All
So
right.
this dough has been this dough's been going for the 10 minutes. And this isn't even some through the magic of time, of time travel stuff, because that was just literally 10 minutes, right? So you can see.
It's wind chime time.
So what it was before, it was sort of tearing apart, but look at that. Look at those, that kind of those big long strands. This is gluten. That's what gluten does. Is with apologies to everybody who's gluten free, gluten is what makes bread, bread anyway, awesome to make bread with. Is you've got these precursor proteins, with glutenin and gliadin or something. Those and water together start to form gluten. When you work that, in the presence of water, it just makes it. You could just feel the difference, from what it was before to now. This will just go and go.
That stretches more compared to when you could see when I was pushing it down and rounding it, it tore apart.
Yeah. So they developed those nice long strands, and it just makes it awesome. So that way, the yeast have been eating sugar and we'll just say expelling carbon dioxide and a little bit of alcohol.
Having a
The
good time.
CO2, the gluten catches that, right, and sort of traps it in this web of stuff, and it expands, and that's what gives it rise. So
You don't want it to expand.
so this is going to be good.
Yeah.
The reason they call it shortening is that it shortens the strands of gluten. There's places where they get cut, and so then it's just not as big, long, clean. So if you add eggs and butter and this and that and the other to dough, it's awesome, but it's
Mix of more
yeah,
dense.
but it's just not as the crumb is different. It's a little softer, and you can't knead it as long. You can't make it. You can never make a big pizza crust kind of thing if there's a whole lot of eggs in there. It would just poop apart.
It's also a lot more. You're at more risk for overmixing it at that point.
Exactly. So we're gonna go grab this guy that we have.
We're gonna suit up here, boy.
I think this is.
I'm guessing that's done.
Yeah, I think we can call him done.
That's solid.
It's,
Whew.
yeah, it's
All right.
it's a decent little crust, and I think he's about good. You don't have to do that. He's
I'm doing it for fun.
Oh, sorry. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think this is nice and pretty.
Alexa, stop the timer.
So did you guys talk about how long you leave the dough in the proofing oven?
Yeah. So I even have the recipe mostly typed up even, so we'll be able to post it pretty quick.
Imagine that.
Usually we proof it for it could be anywhere from maybe 30 minutes, 40 minutes. It kind of depends on the temps that you're getting. But yeah, like 45 minutes. I probably wouldn't go longer than an hour unless it's like from very cold temperatures or something. We were going from room temp, so the proof, if it proofs too much, you'll sometimes get these big, like big holes in it or other kind of things, or it'll just get too big, and then when it goes in the oven, it can just
it can collapse, which is
weird
not
things
fun.
happen.
It looks very bad.
Yes, yeah. So
if you're going for like a nice
yeah.
looking loaf,
Yep.
I've turned the oven off as well. Please remember to turn your ovens off. It's really hard. It'd be a really bad time to burn your house down now.
yeah.
Karen says we triggered her Amazon.
Oh,
Yeah.
I know we need to start ordering stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey Echo, send free things to Chris and Sebastian's house. Free whatever.
So
our
your mom
wish list
says
is up there.
so interesting. I will watch this again. I actually have yeast in the pantry, though a little expired. Sandra, we use expired yeast. Well,
Exclusively,
not
almost.
exclusively, but like, yeah, it doesn't stop us, and it's generally fine if it's been
Yeah.
stored properly. So
One thing you can do is you can put the yeast in a little bit of warm water with a little bit of sugar and give it the kind of kick thing, and then just see if it foams. And if it foams, make your stuff. And if it doesn't,
Get different yeast.
Yeah, wait a little longer.
Make
or,
cookies.
Yeah,
or get some of Jen's sourdough starter.
exactly. Give the yeasty boys a call. Because they'll, yeah.
I now have that way stuck in my head, even though. It's
Okay, so we've got one loaf complete. We've got our dough complete, and then
something proofing.
Yeah, we got the guy proofing. Let's see. Yeah, so.
Oh, he's got
Yeah,
a little. He's got a little
it's-
bigger.
Well, yeah, this is actually, I think probably warming 2 is maybe the right temperature for that, but whatever, that's not the, yeah. Yep, and then we've got,
Medium.
yeah, and then I think what we're going to do with this one is we're actually going to, we'll let it rise and stuff, but then once that happens, I think we're going to try and freeze this one a little bit, so that way we can, stage all this bread out. But, yeah.
'Cause,
And not eat 3 loaves in one sitting like monsters.
Yeah, but that rounding thing, yeah. Do you see? Like, it's kind of the technique's not too killer. You kind of just, if you're kneading it and punching it down, whatever else, you just kind of get to the point that it's like, really just round. You sort of like tuck all the, all the funky parts in on itself.
When you do that little rotate,
and
it
then it's ready
naturally
to go.
wants to drag its weird bits underneath.
Yes,
Think of it as like a
exactly.
giant roll, basically.
Yeah.
So what we showed you for roll making will work fine for.
Yep. But this one's ready to go in the heat vent.
all right.
Grab the towel. I'm gonna pop that boy over.
Yes. And,
So Lindy wants to know if you can teach her to make keto bread.
Oh,
yeah.
it's hard. but-
Well, it's not hard. You just need to there's different leaveners, right? The things that like can let it rise and things like that, or things that give it the protein structure to be able to trap stuff. So, yes, like for different versions. I mean, sometimes keto means different things or whatever else. But yeah, there's some pretty decent stuff. We have friends who are gluten free, like their kid is very allergic to gluten. Who have come up with some awesome stuff there. And then I think we've even had a couple of paleo sort of recipes and stuff. So yeah, there are definitely some things you can do.
It's not impossible.
They sometimes involve things like eggs or like beating egg whites and then folding it into stuff and everything else because eggs are a nice protein too that traps things.
It's hard to make vegan keto bread.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
So any other questions? I think, are we getting pretty close to wrapping up?
I mean, we're finished. Like, I mean,
Got
Yeah.
bread?
yeah, we've been just killing time really because everything.
All right.
We've resolved all the timelines now. They're all back together.
Yeah.
Jack Bauer is saved.
We've got it. It's all unified.
And
Well, just
we're
to
gonna go eat some hot bread.
we didn't have a chance to say hello to anybody, so
yeah.
there's a few folks that are on or have been on at some point. So Bruce Lonnie's been here. I mentioned Lindy and our folks and Gwoon. And Karen has joined us at some point along the way. Obviously, we talked about Jen. We're very glad to have her here. So
Jen's
hello.
eternal.
Bridget Laura Murchison, Hunter Christensen, and Anne LeBlanc were here.
Got a lot of. That's cool.
Paul Ainsworth, Danielle. How's it going, Danielle? David Ball. Let's see. I think that's our crew for today. Oh, Sherry Dillon Coffer. Sherry
Oh,
Dillon
hi.
Coffer. Yeah. And Allison Titus Nelson I mentioned earlier. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
and of course the requirement after some baking is a nice.
Cold drink.
As long as you're worried about fermentation all day long, you might as well have yourself some nice beer along with it.
Exactly.
Today we're drinking Irish Death. It's nice
not
dark
that
ale.
bad.
It's pleasant stuff. Yeah.
All right. Thanks very much, everybody. We'll see you next
cool.
week.
All right.
Take
cheers.
care.
Thanks all.